Hey guys, welcome back to another video in my channel of chess miniatures. Today I'm bringing you a very interesting game between two heavy hitters, big guys. Parham Maghsoodloo from Iran, rated at 2719. He's playing with the white pieces, and with the black pieces we have Shahriza Mamedyarov from Azerbaijan, the number one Azerbaijan player. Azeri would be the proper way to say it, who's playing with the black pieces. Now this game comes from the recently finished TechM Global Chess League, which was played in London, a rapid tournament which last year was played in Dubai and this year is played in London. You'll probably all remember this tournament because as they were rapid games, 20 minutes without increment, most of you will probably have seen some of the endings of the game where they were throwing all the pieces around, pieces were falling down, big drama with the clock at the last seconds of each of the games because there was no increment. Now this game in particular didn't have anything to do with that. It was a well thought out game. I think you'll enjoy it. Some interesting things to learn from this game. So stay with me and enjoy. So Parham Maghsoodloo playing with the white pieces, open with c4, the English opening. And something that all you guys need to learn, sorry, if you are Queen's Gambit players with black, but you're facing the English opening, you can't go knight f6. Well, actually you can, but it's not recommended. Because they'll go knight c3, and if you try and put in the Queen's Gambit, like when we play against d4, they can go e4 and e5. And this is a very tricky line, which if you don't know how to play well, you'll land in trouble very, very soon. So, most top players against c4, if they want to play the Queen's Gambit, they play e6. And against knight c3, directly d5. And this is a good move because now black is actually threatening d4, gaining some space. So either white plays d4 straight away, and we have a Queen's Gambit, or, as in the game, white plays c takes d5, and then d4. And now we have a Queen's Gambit exchange variation. Most players here go knight to f6, allowing bishop to g5, which is perfectly correct. Now we play bishop to e7, and the game continues. Mamedyarov uses the Armenia system, which is to play bishop to e7 first. Petrosian was our favorite player of this line. And then subsequently, nearly all the Armenian players, Akopian, Sargsyan, all the best Armenian players, Aronian, have played this idea. Now, by playing bishop to e7 before knight f6, we sidestep bishop to g5. Of course, white can play knight to f3 first, and then play bishop to g5, but then he can't get the setup we get in the game with the knight going to e2. So it's quite interesting to play bishop to e7. You're not risking anything. The only small problem is that the bishop goes to f4. And now, if we want to develop our bishop to f5, which is what Mamedyarov does in the game, there is a small nuance, which is knight g to e2, with the idea knight to g3. Of course, this is theoretical. It's fully playable for black. But I think it's the type of position that Maghsoodloo would probably prefer over Mamedyarov. Knight to d7, knight g3, hitting the bishop. Bishop to g6, bishop to e2. Now, it just seems that white is going for castle. But in that case, why wouldn't you play bishop to d3 and try and knock off this bishop which is dominating a long diagonal? So black played knight to f6 here. Perfectly correct. Although the computer does suggest queen to b6 as an alternative. I don't like that too much. But having the bishop controlling the long diagonal means that queen takes b2 is actually a threat. White would no longer have rook to b1. So it's an interesting move. a5 gaining space is interesting. And also the weird knight to f8, which is tremendously weird. But it does have some sense, transferring the knight to g6, hitting the bishop on f4 in a situation where the bishop doesn't have too many squares to move to. So it does make some sense. In any case, Mamedyarov played knight to f6 and probably expecting castles. But now Maghsoodloo brings a bit of flavor to the game. He plays h4, threatening h5, winning the bishop. Now, it has to be said that these advances, h4, h5, with the knight on g3, generally are not so strong because black blocks with h5, and here we would really need our knight on e5 to swap off the bishop and gain a structural advantage. This is not the case here. But Maghsoodloo has another idea. He actually wants to try, at some point, capture the pawn on h5, as we shall see in the game. But now he can't, because black has 3 defenders. So he plays a3. Maybe for b4, maybe just a waiting move, maybe trying to prevent knight, queen to b6, because sometimes when you capture a pawn on b2, knight to a4 wins the queen if he doesn't have the a3 escape square. We don't really know. For the moment he just plays a3. And black could have played a5, knight to b6, even king f8, all very sensible moves. But instead of that, he precipitately played knight to e4, which I think is not the best move. But not necessarily because of Maghsoodloo's response. Maghsoodloo went for the pawn with knight takes a5. But the pawn could be recovered because this one here is also under strong attack. Maybe just swapping off the knight and playing rook to c1, we could claim that white is slightly better, a slightly preferable pawn structure, and maybe the bishop on g6 slightly locked in. It's not much, but I do think white is slightly better here. But Maghsoodloo goes for the pawn. And here, black could have and should have played bishop takes h5, g6, and when the bishop drops back, exchange off knights and recover the pawn. And here this position is roughly equal, possibly very slightly better for white because of the 2 bishops. But black is very solid, can bring his king to safety here. Knight, good squares for the knights. I really think that black shouldn't have too much trouble finding equality in this position. But he didn't play that. He played knight takes c3. Again, he could have gone for bishop to h5 here with a similar position as before. But Mamedyarov decided to go for the c3 pawn. He wants to pick up the c3 pawn. And if white mistakenly goes for the g7 pawn with check, king to f8 might be not something you really want to do because there might even be tactics here. Look at this. Knight h5, queen takes pawn check, king here, and now maybe the queen is overloaded, protecting the rook and the knight at the same time. And maybe we can exploit that. Let's see if this is possible. Bishop takes, and now rook takes. And I'm wondering what would happen in this position. This is just a thought, because there could be some huge fireworks here after queen takes rook. And there's a mate here. But of course, this is not a forced variation. Black also has some checks here to save the queen and then bring a piece to defend. So this would be totally unclear. So white prefers not to go for that, and he plays king f1, which is a very good move. Queen takes c3, and now an excellent move, g4. Not only getting space for the king on g2, but now he is threatening to take on g7 and follow up with h5 and h6. Now, I really think this is an important position to understand. King to f8, king to g2. Because now what we're going to see in the rest of the game is white attacking on the king side. Both kings are not totally safe. But more importantly, this is an excellent game, an instructive game, to understand that if you're being attacked on one side of the board, it's not a good idea to leave your queen stranded on the other side of the board, because you will be in trouble on the defense, and you really need your queen to defend a lot of squares and maybe prepare some counterattacks. So pay attention to the queen stranded on c3 and try and learn the lesson from this game regarding this strategic concept. On the attack, if the queen of the opponent is on the other side of the board, you're doing much better than if the queen is near the defending king. You'll see. Bishop to c2, hitting the queen. Obviously, we're not going to exchange queens. We're going to play queen to g1. The computer suggests that maybe here c5 is the best option, already creating some tension in the center, and possibly after pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. You could argue that the pawn is weak on d5, but this is a very weird position. White is not going to try and blockade on d4 and play against the isolated queen pawn. There's much more going on this position, much more dynamics, so it's not so important to have a slightly weak pawn. Black's pieces are trying to find some interesting squares and tactics. Instead of that, he played g6, which I think is already a mistake. It doesn't seem it's going to be a problem because the king might go here, but he is starting to get slightly weak on the king side. Of course, black played this move in order to pick up the pawn on h4. But now he's going to be in trouble. Now Maghsoodloo played a wonderful move, and I suggest that you pause the video for a moment here and see if you're able to find which move, strategic move, did Maghsoodloo play here. And remember, this is a 20-minute game, so very, very well played by the Irani player with white. Have you found the move? He played g5. Wonderful move. Multi-purpose move. First of all, it blocks the connection for the bishop to the rook, so now we get the file. Secondly, it allows white's bishop to transfer to g4, which is very active. Third, it doesn't permit one of these two pieces coming to f6. And fourth, if we get an attack going, as you'll see later, the pawn on g5 will limit black's defenses. So a very, very strong move. Rook takes h1. Already there's a direct threat. Note, as I said before, the bad position of the queen on the queen side, unable to participate in defensive tasks. Also, the bishop is a light hitter. It doesn't do much there on c2, but especially the queen. And now another very good move, bishop to g4. Not only threatening the knights, but also controlling some vital squares for the attack. Now, as an example of a very nice checkmate here, take a look at this pattern. In the game, Mamedyarov played rook to d8, protecting the knight. However, knight f8 might seem reasonable, trying to bring the knight to the defense. And now look at this checkmate pattern. Bishop to h5, e5, threatening mates. Knight to h7. Queen takes h7, fantastic queen sacrifice. King takes, and now the opera mate with rook to h8. Of course, we all need to know these checkmate patterns. If you don't know it, you're learning it now. And then you can spot them in a position such as this. You could already try and spot these mating patterns. So Mamedyarov played rook d8, knocked off the knights, threatens mate with bishop e5, captures a pawn. Already things are looking very bad for black. And here the finesse, queen to h3, move 25. That allows us to classify this game as a miniature, and Mamedyarov had to resign. Why? Well, basically because he's being attacked with the queen, and all defenses doesn't work. For example, if he plays rook to h7, again, we have all these fantastic mates, which we saw before. If, alternatively, he captures the rook on a1, we again play f7, threatening the mates. He has to take with the king. We knock off the rook with check. Bishop to e7, bishop to d6. And here, it's quite easy to follow up with a mating situation and also knocking off the bishop here. So, definitely a correct moment to resign by Mamedyarov. And I think it's a very interesting game. It's very similar to the modern chess, the modern dynamic chess that we're seeing nowadays, where we're not playing old, solid strategic systems, but the top players are going for these dynamic systems with these rapid h4s and g4s with a very unbalanced position. And remember what I said before, the importance of not leaving the queen offside when you're facing a direct attack to your king. So, if you enjoyed, I would appreciate that you subscribe to the channel, maybe leave a comment underneath and share the video with your friends who might also enjoy this content. If you're a Spanish speaking player, in the comments you have a link to my Spanish channel. Meanwhile, enjoy and see you in the next video. Have fun.